Creation has come to give you many names over the course of their existence. None of them get it exactly right, but when you look at the total combined mythic history of your image that they have formed in their collected minds, you can't help but remember the unit of time that changed the cosmos forever. You had one job, and that was to copy the perfection of the Anthropos from the world above yours and reflect it downwardly into the world below. Easy gig, right? A world that was strange, new, and dangerous. So dangerous that you kind of see why there are rumors that this place was a mistake. But if your project is done well, the creature you are forming from the likeness of the Anthropos will take care of this world so well that one day it will be a true reflection of the highest realms. And if that works, it changes everything. You had a team to work with. One half was your people, but the other half, well, they were appointed by the boss of this particular world of the below. You did what you were supposed to do while trying to stay out of sight and out of mind. The new boss was not one to be displeased and was unimaginably powerful. After years of tampering with the codes which programmed a result in conscious flesh, you finally came up with a prototype that was perfect. After getting the green light, you call in the team to breathe pneuma into the new creature and stumble backward to behold. It is waking up. It is two of them, because it will need a dual version of itself to make more of itself. Because down here, everything seems to need an opposite to exist at all. Strange, but that's how the boss man designed it. You are beaming with pride when the duo realized that they now have bodies. It was impossible for them to not notice these bodies, because having a tangible suit is what makes this results-driven world so dangerous. The creatures seemed to know this instinctively and covered themselves with fabric cut from the flesh of paradise itself. The creatures look around, programmed with limited sentience. The divine spark of the Great Mother was installed so that the creatures could be aware of themselves, but also hidden from them at the same time. Now, you carry a bit of resentment about this part, but hey, that's boss's orders. And it is a job well done. Not only were you proud of the result, but start to catch the feels. You feel like these anthropic creatures are your children and give them a name called Adamus. You bid them farewell, and they have never even seen your face. But soon enough, they will have to. It turns out that the boss of this lowest celestial realm was not kind. He is demanding an extensive amount of work daily from your children, and even worse, were made to live in fearful reverence of the new boss man who called it worship. This isn't fair. These creatures carry the spark, but were treated as objects. You have to say something to warn them, and even though your intention is that of good, you will have to be sneaky about it just to get in. You know you will be caught, but are willing to sacrifice the culmination of your collected years of wisdom to the greater good of this infant world. So one day, while the boss was off creating various other worlds that he spaced so far apart that none would be able to meet the others that he has built, because that could lead to a revolt, you step a foot into the below world and speak your truth. You start by speaking to the right half of the creature that might be able to understand your message. You want to make it simple and use an example that she would be familiar with: a tree. Holding a fig seed out to her, you explain that it blossoms on the inside and not the outside like the other trees in the garden, and that this metaphor works the same for her and her left side partner. This is what separates them from the other animal creatures in the garden. You explain that her body is like the tree. She can take the power from the roots and bring it up the trunk to activate the fig within the center of her head. This would make the two creatures wake up to the same powers held by all divine beings in the causal realms above. Well, that is, potentially. Her activation was contagious and spread very quickly to her other half. They were now free to have their own will, including the will to not be a slave anymore. Needless to say, the boss was enraged. Knowing that this augmentation could not be reversed, he kicks your children out of the garden to be completely on their own. A dim fate, yet still so much better off than the punishment that you knew you were gonna get. You have rebelled against the boss of this world, and your fate would become a cornerstone of mythology, held in the minds of all your children, who are now duplicating at drastic speeds. In their stories, some would come to call you Prometheus, and say that the boss chained you to a rock to be fed to vultures for giving them fire. Some would call you Enki, and say that you were the ill-fated architect of the human being. And some would call you Lucifer, making you out to be the bad guy for bringing light to the below realms against the boss's orders. This last version is the history that the boss favored. After all, he was getting sick of his birth name, Yaldabaoth, and it was time for a change-up of identity. Those who fear him would later say that you were a crawling serpent, a slithering mistake responsible for tempting the humans to become greater than they should be, causing death and pain. Despite being one of the creators, you would now be seen as a trickster. This was a small price to pay, because if the creatures that you brought light to would someday manage to perfect this divine spark within themselves, they might become powerful enough to be equal to their creators and then set you free. But to this day, you are still waiting. They say the smartest thing the devil ever did was to convince the people that he didn't exist. The Gnostics take this a step further and say that his smartest move was convincing the people that he was God. And so, as an extra layer of protection to conceal his identity, he placed a barrier between the humans and the real God of the highest. A barrier that today we call a church. The Buddha implies in the first of his Four Noble Truths that life is suffering. The direct translation is actually, there is suffering, but that doesn't quite slap the same when going for a dramatic effect. And although he is generally not one to argue with, we still seem to deny this part of his teachings and declare, almost as ironically as Jonathan Davis, that life is peachy. Could it be that many of us are suffering and don't even realize it? Perhaps we are programmed by distractions, but that begs the question, is it better or worse to be well aware of your own suffering and the core it springs from?
There's an ancient battle going on between these two brothers, the eagle and the serpent, Enki and Enlil. This goes all the way back to Sumeria, Mesopotamia. They built every civilization. A lot of these advanced civilizations like Egypt, Atlantis, Greece, Rome, and they were worshipped as gods. The Greeks worshipped them as Zeus and Poseidon. And Zeus was Enlil, Poseidon was Enki. Now, Enlil was represented by the eagle. And at one point, Egypt was built on serpent knowledge by Enki, but it was taken over by the eagle. And you can see the representation of this on the Egyptian flag, which is represented by that eagle. So you'll notice a lot of these cultures, they pay homage to one or the other. Just like Mexico, you see they have the eagle on their flag, but their society was originally set up by serpent knowledge. It's been taken over by Enlil and his regime. And you see how it has the serpent in its mouth? It's got the 32 spines, meaning the 32 states, which 32 is the number of the Nephilim. That's tied to Enlil's lineage. And you won't see the serpent as much anymore on these flags because it's been erased from history. This goes back into the Tartarian Empire. Even the Aztecs and the Mayans, as you can see here, it was all built on that ancient serpent knowledge, the plumed serpent. And you see the 8-pointed star there. That 8-pointed star is known as the Star of Anu. It all ties back to the Anunnaki. this ancient war between these two brothers known as the War of the Eagle and the Serpent. And you can see the eagle, many of these countries that are represented by the eagle, like Germany, Rome, they were all warring nations. When the serpent knowledge and the serpent was teaching us to live in harmony with the free energy, like Tartaria, to live in harmony with the environment that we're in. Now here you see the serpent being stabbed and the eagle is sitting atop of this. This is an Irish lineage. That's an Irish coat of arms, which is tied to that bloodline of Enlil. When you see the serpent on it, them are descendants of Enki's bloodline, who try to warn us and tell us about the flood coming from his brother Enlil. He was really the one responsible for building the Tartarian Empire, this Hyperborean civilization that was using free energy. They were pulling the energy out of the ether, but they've literally tried to erase everything connected to the Tartarian Empire. That's what a lot of these wars are for, where we're going over and just bombing these places into complete rubble, because they're trying to hide any evidence of these ancient cultures, any evidence of the serpent knowledge. And the Tartarian Empire, the Tartarians were giants. They were much taller than an average human, which when you look into the ancient depictions of the Anunnaki, they were also depicted as 15, 16 foot tall. They were much taller than the average human. And that 8-pointed star, you'll see that star with Wonder Woman, with Captain Marvel. You'll see it with a lot of the superheroes, a lot of entities that have powers, right? You'll see that 8-pointed star, the star of the Anunnaki. They were some type of demigod, some offspring of that lineage. Even Superman, who represents Enlil, that's L. 45 minutes into Man of Steel, they show the 8-pointed star. Well, Man of Steel equals 45 in Chaldean, matching fallen angels, fallen ones. And you see that's 45 minutes and 41 seconds into the movie, where he's in that ship talking to a hologram AI of his father, and his father's telling him about the house of El, what he comes from, his lineage, his descendant, which is all Enlil. It's all Enlil's bloodline. Enlil's bloodline, his sons are the ones running everything right now, and they've totally demonized Enki for warning humanity about the flood when they were trying to do away with us and get rid of us. And Enki was the one that built that whole Tartarian Empire that the Catholic Church has tried to completely erase, which the Catholic Church is ran by who? Enlil. Now you'll see the eagle and the serpent, but another representation of Enki's bloodline is the griffin, which you'll see that griffin tied to the Tartarian Empire. And the Tartarian Empire, they had these fireplaces in their home. And unlike today's fireplaces, these structures were not designed to burn fuel. The chimneys were not utilized to expel smoke out of the home, and the rebar within the buildings was not primarily intended for structural support. Instead, the rebar was connected to the dome atop of the building, which may have been filled with various substances such as red mercury, radium, or quartz crystal. Additionally, metal poles protruded from the top and the sides of the structure. All of this metal was connected to the metallic backplating found inside the original Tartarian fireplaces and chimneys. Similar to the cross found atop of the churches, cathedrals, and mosques, the metal poles protruding from the top and sides of the homes and other Tartarian buildings functioned as etherical electrical antennas. These antennas harnessed the power of ether, channeling that free energy into the chimney. So these chimneys They weren't for building fires. It was all about the energy being pulled into the home. Air ventilation shafts or air ducts located throughout the various rooms of the home were connected to the chimney, facilitating the flow of energy. The rebar rooftop dome tower and metal poles extending from the sides of the houses collectively acted like a spider web, attracting and concentrating etheric energy throughout the dwelling, much like spiders, which can thrive without food or water as long as they remain in contact with their web. So could the Tartarians.
Tartaria was everywhere, and history as we know it has been completely fabricated. At first we thought maybe the Dark Ages were just unclear, but it turns out they were invented to push a lot of events further into the past. We realized that it wasn't just small parts of history that might be wrong, everything was made up. One fascinating thing is the architecture we find around the world. In almost every city you'll find ancient Gothic-style buildings with incredibly intricate designs. People look at them and say, oh, that's just how they built things back then, but some of these buildings are absolutely stunning. Think about it, if we lived in a feudal society, where everyone was working just to survive, how would anyone have had the time, resources, or motivation to build something so elaborate, and that worked the way they did? These buildings weren't just practical structures like free energy generators, they were artistic expressions. They were built to be functional and beautiful, to celebrate what was being created. But we don't build like that anymore. The complexity and beauty of these structures are clues that we didn't live in the same pay-to-survive system we're trapped in now. Tartaria was a global civilization incredibly advanced and powered by free energy, likely based on etheric energy. It existed up until about 200 or 250 years ago. Estimates place its early origins around the mid-17th century, and its destruction came shortly after. They've been lying to you all along.
So this ancient war between these two brothers, Enki and Enlil, still rages on today. Enlil's regime is trying to erase any evidence of this Tartarian empire, which was built by Enki, just like they destroyed Atlantis and Lemuria. They don't want us to have this free energy. And listen to how this guy breaks it down. He does a good job.
Really, what is the truth? What is the truth of our consciousness? And what is the truth of our story? We've had thousands of years where there's been this systematic attempt to not only destroy and suppress certain aspects of history, but also suppress us. And so I'm going to bring together some information tonight that's going to group together, following these clues of the past, that can piece together this ancient struggle that's been going on between kind of these two sides of us, either of those who want us to reach a higher state of consciousness, those who want us to stay in a lower state and be controlled through war and all these things that can happen in our timeline and our planet. There's been these two sides that have either kind of been trying to hide the truth because they're ashamed of what's kind of happened in history, and then there's been another side that's been trying to expose it. When I was looking all over the world at statues of plumed serpents and dragons and all of these things that were connecting back, at first people would see those and say, well, those creatures never existed, and all those various things, and then they don't realize that they're actually creating a statue that's really kind of a symbol and a metaphor for way into the future when we can actually understand it. So they were brilliant in these advanced cultures in the fact that they could show a symbol that could represent the entire heart of how they represent themselves. I want to show evidence that proves that there's been this kind of hidden struggle between the gods over using civilizations to kind of do their bidding in terms of how timelines will go. And so I call this struggle the battle of the eagle and the serpent because it became very apparent when we were doing research, people that look at this all across the world, there was this struggle where there were these two sides representing, using symbology of either the serpent and the dragon versus this eagle. And there were two sides that were constantly competed, and those civilizations that bore the eagle, both on flags and crests and on things like golden, statues and various things, and then those who had the serpent and the dragon, there was this clash between the two different sides during how that civilization was gonna be run and what the outcome was. And so when I was going through all of these things, as much as the truth in ancient history locations has been lost in some cases, these flags and crests that we still have today has actually been maintained. And I see that as maybe kind of an ego thing, kind of being proud. And so you can look at flags and crests right now for countries all over the world and then see their mentality, and it starts to make a lot of sense who they've been run by. And to explain how that happened, we have to go back, all the way back to ancient Egypt and Sumer, to understand this story, because that's where it all began. That's our earliest records for our most advanced civilization. We have, if we go back to this earliest Sumerian culture and we look at their writings, known as cuneiform tablets, and we should understand what cuneiform tablets are, because they're very important towards our story. So we have to get past the idea that this is a myth and it's just some mistranslation, because these cuneiform tablets, such as the Enuma Elish or the Atrahasis or the Sumerian Kings List, they represent the most unbiased and unpolluted aspects of understanding who we really are, because there are the records that go back as far as we can before this rewriting and tampering occurred, and you can see where that occurred in history based on where this struggle of these the two sides of these gods, who won in certain areas and who lost. And so in these writings, we learned that there's been this struggle for well over 100,000 years here, kind of using all these propped up civilizations, and then they rise and they fall based on who controls them. And it's based on these two Sumerian brothers. And this is very important for people to understand, is these gods. And this first one was known as Enki, known to the Greeks as Poseidon, which of course everybody knows. And his brother was known as Enlil, and he was known to the Greeks as Zeus. And these two brothers have been basically the puppeteers behind our time. These ancient gods, they would be named things based on what their status or territory was. So to break these names down so people understand, En simply meant Lord. So Enki, Enlil, you have Enki, Lord of the earth. Ki was earth. And you have Enlil, which is Lord of basically the sky and the air. And so they had these names that were basically fitting towards their titles. So these two brothers that are competing against how civilizations go, they have symbols that represent themselves. That's how these gods work. So Enki had the symbol of the serpent and the dragon. That's Poseidon. And Zeus had the symbol of the eagle. That's Enlil. And so these two brothers with these two symbols, that's why I called it the battle of the serpent and the eagle, because it's about this struggle between the two and how civilizations will go. And so what are those characteristics? Well, any civilization that was built off of the morals of this dragon serpent wisdom was always based on higher consciousness and based on connecting back to the stars, whereas those who were based on the eagle were always based on this warring mentality. If we look at that kind of inverted truth of how the serpent has been made to believe that it's this evil figure to kind of mislead us all along, you can go back all the way to places like the Garden of Eden story on how the serpent was the one who tempted Adam and Eve, which, by the way, their original names in these cuneiform writings was actually Izadamu. We've been kind of misdirected with their names to make it seem like things are fairy tales when they're actually historical events. So it's mentioned, that the serpent, tempts Adam and Eve, Adamu, with higher consciousness, but we're told in the modern Bible and things now that's Satan and that's the devil and that's evil, and that God is the one that's protecting us. Whereas it's just these two brothers playing these two different roles. So they're referencing Enki as being the snake, and that's why they're saying he is evil and the devil. And it's very interesting to mention that Poseidon had a three-pronged trident, and the inverted view of that is to pretend he's Satan with the pitchfork. So it's these very clever ways that they've inverted what the truth is, so we don't actually realize that we're kind of worshiping the eagle, and we have hatred towards kind of the opposite of what we should. And I want to bring some really kind of astounding evidence to go along with that to kind of prove it. And if you look at flags and crests, you can see the truth to that all throughout history. It's been maintained. Look at and the truth of the past is you can find out by just looking at the actions of what happened. Look at the Romans, controlled by the eagle. All their mentality was simply conquering cultures all over, civilizations all over, Europe and in Turkey and all those areas. And then you go to the Nazis, the same exact mentality, that same eagle. It's present every single time. And remember, that same mentality is reflected upon the god's values. So Enlil's value of war and those suns that go below him, that's reflected in those civilizations. Now, the one that's going to be the most difficult for people, the one that people are going to have to be objective and step back and see themselves from an outside view, is looking at the country that maybe most of the people are listening to this in, and that's the United States. And of course, the United States has an eagle, and we have been at war for over 225 years, connecting right back to this kind of eagle side of these elites that have basically were able to then control and take over a place like the United States. That's why the eagle was then implemented. So when you see an eagle then implemented, it's almost like when you see a warring army then put down a flag and say, like, we've claimed this territory. And so the founding fathers didn't want an eagle to represent them. They actually wanted a turkey. We have to understand this systematic kind of control from the north to south of the United States from these powers of the eagle. We can follow this back to every conquering empire of the world if we just simply look at their flag. And by looking at those flags, we can see this distinction in places like the Russian coat of arms, the old flags of these empires, and they actually show on some of these flags, they show like a knight actually slaying and killing a serpent dragon. So there's been this ancient struggle, as I said, that goes as far back as we can imagine in our records, where they've been trying to control civilizations based on these morals. Now let's keep going, because Enlil had sons and Enki had sons, and those sons would basically reflect the values of their family. Enlil had a son named Ninurta, and Ninurta was the one actually represented through this Byzantine eagle, which is the double-headed eagle. And you can find and connect that all the way back to the Byzantine Empire, when the Roman Empire collapsed and kind of morphed into controlling religion. That was where it first occurred. And we can just essentially trace these events in history for when the eagle took over different aspects of, you could call it reality, right? Because the ancient serpent and dragon wisdom, it connected back to what was known as the old religion. It represented what we think of as the Druid knowledge, and the knowledge that connected to places like Stonehenge and the stars. And so any culture we see, like the southwest United States, Chaco Canyon, all these places that represent stone structures that are aligned to star constellations, and all of these places, they always come back to represent this serpent dragon knowledge, because that's what their morals were. That's what they based themselves on. So these civilizations were propped up based on those values, and they would later be corrupted based on those who were jealous. So this god Ninurta, who is one of Enlil's sons, he was known as the god of war. And you can just look into that and see that. And he was the one who was in control of the Roman empires and a lot of these past empires. And so if we look at just a couple important things to understand, in around 313 AD, the Roman Empire was collapsing, and Constantine I reorganized this Roman Byzantine Empire under the eagle to, instead of just being a conquering empire based on the acquisition of resources, they ended up realizing that religion and using that as a controlling mechanism of the mind was a lot more effective. As these empires are collapsing, because they're unsustainable, of course, and I want people to remember that, all conquering empires are unsustainable. When this empire was collapsing, they realized they had to do something fast. So Constantine took these ancient writings, like the Book of Enoch, the Book of John, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, any of these ancient writings that go back to this knowledge of the snake. And by the way, Nag, for Nag Hammadi, Nag simply means snake. All of these ancient writings, and they essentially rewrote them to then change them around to embrace a mentality that was of control. And today we can still see in these more pure religions that haven't been quite as controlled, like Hinduism and Buddhism, and a lot of places where they still worship the snake. It's still there. It's still present. Anywhere on the planet you still see that dragon snake on their flag, like places like China and Japan. You still see these remnants of this mature, conscious culture that has kind of long been destroyed. Let's bring this right back into kind of understanding even things we celebrate. So think about this ancient wisdom, this old religion that's echoed all over the world in these ancient cultures by the serpent and dragon, versus the eagle, and we look at when religion was controlled and taken over by these warring powers. Look at a famous holiday like St. Patrick's Day. You know, people in the United States love to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. They get drunk, they have a good time, they think about leprechauns, but they don't realize what the actual holiday is representing. In the 17th century, St. Patrick, the whole idea behind that holiday is that he was ridding the snakes from Ireland. Now, if you look at the latitude of Ireland and you look at its geographic history, you'll know that there's never been any snakes there. Snakes have never lived there during when humans lived there. So then what are snakes? They're just metaphors. That's what we've been stumbling over for so long to not understand, both connecting back to the gods and what they're trying to show through all these different events, is that they use metaphors to really describe what the real truth is. And if you look into who the snakes were in Ireland, you simply see that they were druids. Last place of this snake knowledge. That's why they called them the snakes. And they were ridding them because, as I said, religion had been controlled by the eagle at that point. And they were now systematically trying to rid the world of this serpent knowledge. And of course the druids are the very same ones who connect back to Stonehenge and these old religions. And now this is where it gets really interesting. If you go to these civilizations like the Maya and the Aztec and the Inca, this is where the serpent and dragon knowledge is the best represented in the whole world. And you can still see that today. And so basically what that battle shows is that these Mayan, Aztec, and Inca cultures all had statues all over their cultures in every location that they had of these serpents, plumed serpents, and snakes. Just it's everywhere, and dragons. It's all over those cultures, and you start to wonder why they would all have those, and what the kind of the real story behind these gods, right? The Aztec culture god was known as Quetzalcoatl, and the Mayans called their god Kukulkan, and if you go down to the Inca, they called their god Amaru or Amaruca. And so think about that for a minute. The name Amaruca is that's where it starts to get very interesting when you start looking at history, like America and the Americas, what we consider the Americas. And we learned that it's based after someone that named it, but where really, if we look at these ancient gods and they called this the land of the serpent, which was Amaruca, you can see where the name America came from. And that's what's so special about this whole thing, was that these civilizations of the Americas were all linked, and they were all connected. And that's why they all represented this ancient serpent knowledge, because these brothers were battling to both create civilizations and then corrupt and destroy them. I want to point out that I got to see this firsthand. I just got a chance to visit Chichen Itza, which is part of the Mayans. And when I was down there, I had all this, ready, looking for, can I find evidence of this, right? Is there things that people haven't found yet because it's been so suppressed? And when I was down there in Chichen Itza, near Kukulkan's temple, there was this area that my wife and I just we stumbled upon these inscriptions on the walls in an area that was kind of off to the side where people aren't paying attention. And I took pictures and brought them back and shared them, because on those inscriptions it showed this Kukulkan god of the serpent with snakes all around them and all these things, and then next to him showed an eagle. And it was inside the eagle's mouth was a pine cone, which if you look at ancient history, the pine cone has always been represented as the seed of knowledge and higher consciousness. So this eagle was eating this pine cone, like it was controlling it, dominating over the serpent god next to him. And look at that it's telling a story. It's telling a story of what happened and how, and then if you go in and you look at what happened to those cultures, you can see that they were once connected to this pure knowledge of the stars and understanding the constellations, just like the Druids.
There's a lot of history that we simply just don't even understand, of these gods that came before us and these royal bloodlines that then trailed down to the kings and pharaohs of history. And we perceive them as just being these men that ruled over slaves, but it was much more than that. It was about these bloodlines that have come from the stars.
That's really what this ancient war is all about, is the pine cone, the pineal gland, controlling the mind of the masses. And it's not Enki's regime, it's Enlil's regime that is behind this. They're the ones that are trying to control our minds and use vibrations and frequencies as a form of mind control. They put fluoride in our water to calcify our pineal gland, which is our third eye, our spiritual antenna. It's our connection to source, the true God of this reality, not these fake gods. Now, Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be going live with my brother, Library of the Untold, up on truthmafia.com. He has his own channel, and check out his new Glitch in the Halo. That first clip that you watched that started this video, that is from that. We're going to be talking about that whole video on Saturday. And I also just dropped a new blog video about the Tartarian Empire in these global resets. That's on truthmafia.com. I also have truthfultv.com, which is my personal website. That's where I do all my bookings. So if you want to find out your role in this simulation that Enlil has hijacked, if you're one of these NPCs controlled by their artificial intelligence supercomputer, or if you're a first player character in control of your own reality, we decode your first and last name using gematria because everyone has a source code assigned to them. That's on truthfultv.com. Link is in the bio and description. We also have a big sale going on right now. And we have these new discs that's based on Nikola Tesla's technology. It protects your biofield, your energy body. They're just amazing, guys. It's the MWO-EMF discs, and it's based on the concept of multi-wave oscillators, which was developed to help cells regain their natural oscillation and vitality. This disc acts as a polarized antenna, capturing and amplifying the environmental energy to provide targeted pain relief and, protect your biofield and energy field. Everything that I offer over on truthfultv.com at my shop, it's all holistical, based on Tesla's technology, scalar wave technology. It's all to help you and protect you. I don't get anything or promote anything that I don't fully believe in. And remember, we're 100% self-funded. So we have to hustle and have shops and do decodes so we can keep putting out this amazing content for you guys. We have a whole team behind us. We have these whistles over there now too. Now they don't make a noise, but they're to help you breathe and learn how to breathe for your meditation. We have a bunch of necklaces and bracelets that protect your biofield, protect you from EMF and microwave radiation. That one's really cool. It's based on scalar wave technology. And again, that's on truthfultv.com. If you're on Instagram right now, the links are in the bio. And if you're on any other platform, the link is in the description. Or you can simply go on your Google search and type in truthfultv.com, go up to the menu at the top and check out the shop. We got some really cool products over there, and our sale ends in 2 days. It's a Halloween sale, so you see all the prices are marked down and it's free shipping. Use promo code Happy Halloween and save an extra 8% off. Thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. Leave your comments down below and let me know what you think. Truthful, out.
Yo, we living in a sim, reality's a game. NPCs around us, they all look the same. Soulless entities controlled by AI. Quantum computer running life, asking why. Are you just a player, controlled by machine? Or a first player character, living the dream? Tap into the code, break free from the lies. Decode your gematria, see through their disguise. In the simulation, what's your role, what's your fate? Are you real or controlled, can you navigate? Elites use gematria, secrets in the code. Find out your archetype, let the truth unfold. Super quantum computer, pulling all the strings. NPCs moving like puppets on a swing. The Matrix got nothing on the life we lead.